Hey, welcome back to the Disney Plus Super Day Challenge. And today we have Apollo Back to the Moon. This is National Geographic. It's a docuseries, only 2 episodes long though. They're about 45 minutes long each. Yeah, 45 minutes long each. And so yeah, together they make like an hour and a half movie. But it's from 2019, pretty much the 50th anniversary, kind of the 50th anniversary of our first landing on the moon with Apollo 11, 1969. Yeah. So, yeah, this is kind of a big, I think this is a big year. There's a number of Apollo and space race and astronaut related programming that was all released in 2019, like a drama series and a few other things, all put together in this. So this covers the entire span of the Apollo missions, from the first tragic mission, Apollo 1, all the way to, well, I know the most famous one in the later years is Apollo 13, where the Houston, we have a problem, and everything kind of goes wrong until they fix it. And they made a movie starring Tom Hanks, directed by Ron Howard. But this is a documentary, but it warns you right up front and about partway through the episode to remind you that some of the footage you see here is recreations and animations. That some of it's not the actual footage, because there are still people in the world who believe that we never went to the moon and all these missions were fake and those people died for no reason, or maybe they didn't exist, or whatever. Some of these people weren't alive back then. I wasn't alive back then. But I mean, this is these kind of things. By the way, this first episode goes through Apollo 8 and then touches a little bit on Apollo 11, but it mainly goes through the first 8 in the series of missions, and all the things the reasons why we were going, how we were going, the reason why we're not going back, as we haven't been back since the Apollo missions ended. There's a lot to go into this, but some of the most fascinating things is showing what the world was like back then. And people bought TVs when TV was still fairly new-ish. I mean, everything was black and white. The screens were barely bigger than your tablet, and this is a mini. They were small, and yeah, people literally were glued to their TVs to see the moment that man would step on the moon, hopefully, and come back. and live to tell the tale. Early on, of course, they tell the stories of the Apollo 1 mission and the men who did not survive. In fact, gruesomely, and I'm sure this exists in other documentaries as well, they do play the audio of the 3 men's final moments as the capsule, as it burns up, and you can hear the fire, and then you hear the screams, and yeah, it's unsettling. It is very unsettling. We go through other missions. They talk about, of course, stepping into these capsules in a rush. They blame a lot of the loss of life and the failure so much, even before the Apollo mission started. Failure so much is a result of rushing things, trying to rush things into happening, because we were going up against the Soviets. The Soviets put a man in space. They were the first ones to put a man in space. And they were very close to putting a man on the moon. In fact, they were barely a few hours away behind our astronauts with Apollo 11 when they landed. So if we hadn't done it, well, the Russians would have claimed that as their victory. And of course, the U.S. had a greater advantage due to money. we put a lot of money into, well, this new thing called NASA had been created in the late 50s, I believe. It was very new. Then we had the pressure of JFK making that declaration that we were gonna, go into space and put a man on the moon by the end of the 60s, one way or the other, which is inspirational. It's aspirational. It's just so much. It was so much of a driving force to say we're going to beat the commies. And then we're going to do things not because they're easy, but because they're hard. And it was kind of a big moment. It put a lot of pressure on a lot of people, and a number of people made mistakes, and others lost their lives. And yeah, and that was kind of an understanding, I think, with everybody that went into it, who stepped inside that capsule. We were doing something humanity had never done before. And the whole point of that phrase, when they first step on the moon, it's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That's it is a big deal. We put a human being on another planetary body. It's our own moon. We didn't go to Mars yet, but it's still pretty dang impressive for, honestly, something that has less computing power, but it was dang complex, less computing power than what's in this that I'm holding in my hand right here. But with a budget that is so much bigger, even by the finances of that day. The budget for NASA these days is nothing. It's so small compared to what they had back then. The numbers may seem bigger, but of course, if you take the cost of putting a man on the moon back then and put it in today's dollars, it's a massive amount of money. And yeah, we do not have the budget, even though we have the computing power, we have the technology has improved incredibly. The fact that we have the International Space Station working with other countries and putting people in space on a regular basis, going back and forth, it's pretty impressive. It's pretty dang impressive. And this show talks about all the things that had to go into it, the incredible gains and the horrible losses, and just sort of frames things in a way that shows how the people working on it saw things, the people who experienced it saw things. Yes, we do get a few astronauts talking about this in this documentary. We also get a look at how we as just average, Americans were experiencing this thing, and the Russians too. Yeah, that's one of the things I say is that, by the way, if we didn't get on the moon, like people claim that we didn't go to the moon, it was all made in a Hollywood studio and it's all fake. If we didn't make it, why aren't the Russians saying that we didn't make it? And why aren't they claiming that they did it? They would have pushed their men to take every risk to claim that. Had we not landed with Apollo 11, they would have won, if not made up something. They would have done something that would have put themselves physically on the moon. Even if it meant they didn't come back, they would have put men on the moon just to say they did. So they haven't done that. They could easily do that, but there's never been pushback on it since we did it. So, yeah, that's not covered in this thing, but it's just my attitude towards this whole thing. So, if you're interested in space travel and the whole space race, the origins of the space race, and everything that went into it, this is not an overly complex. It doesn't go into deeply into the technology or the science or anything else. It does just sort of show the steps we took to get to where we were first episode, again, goes only through Apollo 8, and the second episode goes to the rest. I am going to follow up and watching the other one. I figured I got enough here that I could talk about it for after watching one episode. I got the gist of it, but I think on my own, I am going to check out the second episode just to make it complete. So definitely educational, of course, but it's because some of the animation, the digital animation and the recreation with actors gives us a perspective of what it that we wouldn't normally get, because the footage back then was really grainy. Nobody's making that stuff with CGI and everything else. So I say definitely check it out if you're into the space race and the whole the drama of the '60s that build up to it and beyond. So, and taking it from the first steps to the end, and hopefully we'll be back to the moon at some point, but when, I don't know. Well, let's figure out what we're gonna watch tomorrow. Anyway. 195. 195. Keep going. Okay. This is also red. Red indicates that it's a documentary or it's a reality show, or in this case, it's a concert. Yeah. And it's something I'm kind of been looking forward to for a while, because it's one of my all-time favorite bands. In fact, it's the first album I ever bought with my own money, like record, was this record right there. This is the exact one. This is not like a duplicate I bought later at a record store. This is the exact record I bought when I was a kid. The first record I ever bought. Right there. Flash Gordon soundtrack by Queen. We're going to be watching Queen Rock Montreal. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know how long it is, but it should be fun. I don't even know what year it was. It had to be the 80s, 70s, something like that. I'm not sure if this is before or after this album. This is 1980 right here. So Queen Rock Montreal is what we're watching next on the Disney Plus Everyday Challenge. I'll see you back here tomorrow with that. Bye.